Welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole. Welcome if you are new here. Today we're going to be doing the myths of the sea/ocean, and we're going to be doing eight myths here. So number one is the Kraken. So let's get right into number one here. Let me just get my notes. So the Kraken is a mythical sea creature that may be based in reality, but in actuality the legend of the Kraken is more recent than the discovery of the giant squid, which many observers speculate to be at least partially responsible for the current version of the legend. Contrary to popular belief, mostly thanks to Hollywood, the Kraken is not from the mythology of ancient Greece. They had their own Scylla, and the sea monsters of varying forms are found in folklore of many world civilizations. The legend of the Kraken has its roots in Norwegian tales from the 13th century. The name derived from the Old Norse word krik, meaning twisted or crooked, although originally it was called the Hafgufa. It was originally described as a monstrous crab-like creature more than 1.5 miles wide in some stories, often appearing as an island in the sea. The word Kraken doesn't seem to turn up in print until Carl Linnaeus, the Swedish inventor of the modern binomial classification system, described it as a form of cephalopod. Using term Microcosmos marinus to identify it in the first edition of his Systema Naturae in 1735. Linnaeus removed the monster from further editions of the book, but the Kraken was subsequently popularized by Eric Pontoppidan, the Bishop of Bergen, in his 1752, the first attempt at a natural history of Norway. By the 1800s, the Kraken was almost universally described as what we now think of as the giant squid, the first recording of which comes from Pliny the Elder, a Roman naturalist born in AD 23. The giant squid was, even until the 21st century, something of a myth all by itself. They had certainly been seen before and may have even sunk some smaller boats, giving rise to the monster's legend. Giant squid carcasses measuring up to 14 meters long, from the tip of their tentacles to the end of their mantles, turned up on the beaches, and sperm whales were observed with the scars of suckers and hooks that resulted from what must have been titanic battles between two very large animals, although it was most definitely the case that the whales were preying on the squid, not the other way around. And it wasn't until 2004 that a Japanese research vessel managed to land an intact living specimen and filmed Architeuthis attacking bait underneath the vessel. It wasn't filmed until 2012. It's worth nothing that the giant squid is merely the second largest living invertebrate known to exist. It is exceeded by the colossal squid, which is thought to be about the same length, but has a much larger body. The giant squids have the largest eyes known to science, measuring up to an estimated 40 centimeters in diameter. That's crazy. The next, number two, so that was the Kraken myth. That's kind of creepy. That's interesting. I find that the ocean is way more interesting than space. Aliens do not, for some reason, scare me. It doesn't scare me. Like the thought of learning about it kind of bores me, not gonna lie. So I will talk about space stuff, but like I find the ocean very intriguing because, like, again, we've done more research on space than we have in the ocean, so I think it's because it's more of a mystery. So number two is the lost city of Atlantis. The ancient city or island nation actually of Atlantis is another underwater myth that perpetuates in modern culture. Atlantis is part of the work of the legendary Greek philosopher Plato, who lived during the 5th century BC. Whether the island is an entirely fictional product of Plato's mind used to demonstrate his ideas about the concept of a nation-state or not is hotly debated by his own students. Aristotle, for example, a student of Plato, thought Atlantis was entirely allegorical. The less well-known philosopher Crantor, a student of Plato, thought that Plato had used a real story about the real place as a metaphor in his work. Where Atlantis might be located has been subject of many stories, debates, and conspiracy theories, but it remains undiscovered. Despite many claims to the contrary, Plato himself was rather vague, writing that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, or in other words, the entrance of the Mediterranean Sea. The northern pillar of Hercules is what we now know as the Rock of Gibraltar. The southern peak is somewhere in North Africa. Rather, a lot lies beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Plato, clever chap, though he might have been, never drew a map. While Atlantis is most probably a fictional island, it is not entirely without factual origins. The mythology of great floods extends back thousands of years, probably back to the end of the last glacial period, which ended some 10,000 years ago, when naturally occurring changes in the climate have resulted in deluge of flood, water, and sea level rises from the melting glaciers. Volcanic activities, earthquakes, erosion, and movement of the Earth's tectonic plates are all responsible. And although Atlantis itself might not exist, there are other ruins that lie beneath the waves. You can dive, and you can even dive some of them. One of the best known is Anti-Rhodos, home of the palace of the Egyptian queen Cleopatra, which has disappeared beneath the sea after a massive earthquake and subsequent tsunami struck Alexandria in AD 365. It was partly myth, partly legend, partly historical, and fact until scuba diving archaeologists located that remain of the city in 1996. Next, we will be going over the mermaids. That one's also really interesting too. One sec. The mermaid. The mermaids are as well known as underwater creatures who have the upper half is a human woman, the lower half is a tail of a fish. There are also technically mermen, but since the overwhelming majority of seafaring people in historical times were men who spent a very, very long time out at sea without female companionship, there are definitely more mermaids than mermen. The legend of beautiful female sea creatures are present in mythologies of many diverse civilizations around the world, and they're sirens of Greek mythology, beautiful young women who lured sailors to their deaths along the rocky shores of their island home. Through their beautiful singing voices have played a part in their modern portrayal. Sightings of mermaids like the Kraken have been reported throughout the ages. Christopher Columbus, the chap who claimed to have discovered America, reported spotting 3 of them during his voyages. It has been suggested that manatees and dugongs may have been behind the sightings. Clearly, Columbus had spent a lot of time at sea. Like Megalodon, mermaid sightings have been reported up until the present day and have been the subject of elaborate hoaxes. One of the best known was the Fiji mermaid displayed by the P.T. Barnum's famous circus, which later turned out to be constructed of monkey bones and paper mache. No other mythical sea creature has been represented in art and literature as much as the mermaid, but no scuba diver has ever seen one, with the exception of those held in captivity in large tanks at the dive show. Okay, next is the Loch Ness Monster. The locals living near the Loch Ness in northwestern Scotland refer to the creature rumored to be living in the lake waters as Nessie. Depicted as resembling a plesiosaur with a long neck and stubby paddle-like fins, Nessie is the most famous of the world's mythical lake creature, which includes Ogopogo, Tahoe Tassie, and Micol Memney. The scientific community treats Nessie the same way it regards the spaceships from outer space, explaining the sightings as hoaxes and the misidentification of the marine creatures like otters. But for the believers, Nessie might be elusive, but she's definitely real. In 1934, a grainy photographer of Nessie was published in the Daily Mail, credited to Robert Kenneth Wilson, a London physician. It was dubbed the surgeon's photograph. The photo was credence to the monster's existence. It was declared an elaborate hoax in '94. Wilson only delivered it to the newspaper, but Operation Deep Scan in 1987 served as the fuel of fantasies of those who persist in seeking a creature that lurks deep in Loch Ness. Eco sounder units indicated a large moving object at a depth of 5,900 feet under Urquhart Bay. The Daryl Lawrence, whose company Lawrence Electronics donated the sonar devices, said, "There's something here that we don't understand, and there's something here that's larger than a fish, maybe some species that hasn't been detected before." Next is the Bermuda Triangle. Numerous ships and planes have vanished without a trace in a vast triangular swath of Atlantic Ocean loosely bound by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. While theories have accompanied the disappearances, from magnetic anomalies to alien abductions, one of the disappearances in the so-called Bermuda Triangle involved 5 Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, collectively known as Flight 19, that took off from the Naval Air Station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on the afternoon of December 5, 1945. Aboard the Avengers were 14 men. It began as a routine combat training mission, but it ended with the aircraft and crew disappearing over the North Atlantic. The plot thickened that evening after the Navy lost radio transmission with Flight 19. 2 PBM Mariner flying boats were scrambled to search for the 5 planes, but 20 minutes after takeoff, one of the mariners also vanished. That plane and its 13 crewmen were never recovered. At the time, the term Bermuda Triangle hadn't been invented. It was coined by Vincent Gaddis in an article he wrote about Flight 19, which was published by the pulp magazine Argosy in 1964. Other losses in the Bermuda Triangle: U.S. Cyclops 1918 and its crew of 309 went missing. The largest non-combat loss of the life is U.S. Navy history. And in 2015, El Faro, a cargo ship with 33 on board. Well, no one can say with 100% certainty what happened to these ships and aircraft. The losses were most likely due to human error, violent weather, and mechanical failure. Flight 19 was led by Charles Taylor, who became convinced that his compass was malfunctioning and ordered the plane to fly in the wrong direction. Worsening weather further disoriented the pilots. Taylor's lost radio transmission. When was the first plane dropped below 10 gallons? They all go down together. As for the Mariner seaplane, also lost that day, it likely suffered a fire and exploded. So that is what potentially could happen, but again, I don't think that was ever confirmed. That was just a thought that could happen. Okay. Whew. I get winded after talking so much, and I don't know why. I think it could be a part of my asthma. I don't really know. If you guys have any idea why I could get winded, please don't be afraid to comment below, because I would love to take care of that better for myself. Anyways, next is the sea goat. The sea goat is a mythical creature described to have the head of a goat and the lower half of a fish, which became the image of Capricorn. This creature has appeared in mythology of several cultures throughout the years, most notably in ancient Latin, Greek, and Egyptian myths. Unlike many other mythical sea creatures, the sea goat is more of a symbolic entity rather than an actual presence in historical encounters. It's been clear for its origination, as this thing does not exist nor has ever existed. Instead, it represents an idea. However, one tale suggests that Amalthea, the foster mother of Zeus, was sent to live amongst the stars as a reward for caring for him since childhood. The constellation of Capricorn is the sea goat, and the astrological symbol in the zodiac follows the same image, a half goat and a half fish creature. Another states that the sea goat is the wilderness god Pan. According to the legend, Zeus leaped into the Nile River to escape the deadly monster. Tied him, he moved too quickly as he attempted to turn himself into a fish, causing only his lower half to transform. Next one, I don't know how to pronounce this, so just bear with me. It's the Leviathan. The Leviathan, originating from Jewish mythology. The Leviathan is said to be a sea serpent and appears in the biblical Mesopotamian myth. In the Old Testament, Leviathan emerges in the Psalm 74:14 as seven-headed sea monster that God kills to give as food to Hebrews in the wild. In Isaiah 27:1, Leviathan appears as a sea serpent and symbolizes Israel's enemies who will be slain by God. In Job 41, it is an ocean monster that represents God's power of creation. Throughout all works, the Leviathan shows up as a fast-moving, evil-natured sea creature. It also appears as an image of the devil, endangering God's creatures by attempting to eat them in Christianity. This dragon-like creature can be found in the book of the Revelation. While the Old Testament doesn't identify it as the devil, it does discuss the battle between the seven-headed beast and God. Essentially, it was referred to as any sea monster. In the early 17th century works, it was referred to as the overwhelmingly powerful things or people. And that was it. No, there was one more. We did the Flying Dutchman. I thought I read that in here. Just give me 1 second. Whew. Like I said, I get really winded and I don't know why. If you guys have any idea why, let me know. The Flying Dutchman is okay, here we go. Is a fabled Dutch sailor condemned to sail the seas until the judgment day. Essentially, it is considered a bad one if sailors come across the ship. The oldest version of the Flying Dutchman myth dates back to the 18th century. Throughout, there are supposed reported sightings in the 19th and 20th century. Truth be told, it is unclear who the Flying Dutchman is. Some say the captain was Hendrik van der Decken, who naively ventured into the storm and, ignoring the fears of his seamen, contributed to his ship destroyed on the coast of the Cape. According to the myth, this act enraged the gods, who punished the captain by trapping his soul in the sunken ship for eternity. Other versions state that the devil heard him and trapped him in his ghastly boat forever. However, the devil also allowed the Flying Dutchman to redeem himself if he found a faithful woman's love. Since its origin, sightings of the Flying Dutchman have existed for centuries, and needless to say, countless efforts have been made to understand these events. The most logical explanation is that the sailors see an optical illusion, Fata Morgana, which occurs when atmospheric conditions paired with light distort distant objects. I can see that. It's so creepy. Anyways, that's it. I am out of breath. I don't know why. So I'm not going to say much, probably because I was talking really fast. So I'm not going to say much more than that. You guys have an awesome rest of your day. We'll chat soon. Bye now.